Yesterday, I tried for the first time in a couple of years, probably, to read Nisargadatta. I think the name of the book was The Experience of Nothingness. And I had a difficult time following what he was saying. I know it took me a long time before I felt I understood Nisargadatta, years. And I don't know why I followed him so much. He was a little like Robert in terms of what he expected one to get out of what he was saying. But I recognized after about 3 pages why I had a hard time following Nisargadatta. For one thing, right from the beginning, he spells out what his theory is. And he states this is true based on his understanding and should be taken as a final truth and ultimate truth. And the stuff he was saying was such an oversimplification. You know, his philosophy had maybe 4 or 5 elements like consciousness, existence, the world, sense of presence or being alive. And he reduced all of human experience, our experience, into these major categories that are very simplistic. And on page 3, he said, all that we've been talking about so far are the elements, primary elements, or the only elements of our life, of our existence, of our knowledge that we need or should be talking about. And he said, nowhere in these concepts is hidden or buried or implicit in any of these concepts about existence in the world. The idea of individuality. And it struck me. His main point, or derivative point of his arguments, is that individuality didn't exist. It was like a concept we had. And it was a false concept. And we have to get rid of it so that we can become nothing more than an observer. I figured, wow, this is the kind of information and understanding and philosophy I could expect of an Athenian 2,000 years ago. I mean, his concept of life And what's important reduces to 5 or 6 different elements. And that's always why I had such a difficult time understanding him, because he'd speak about his understanding. And to me, it was always an oversimplification. And I kept looking for what he's really talking about behind those words. And reading him those 3 pages yesterday was quite revealing. I could easily say, without a chuckle, without an oversimplification, that Nisargadatta is full of shit. In the same respect, Robert was full of shit. Robert spends all of his talks talking about don't react to the world, pay no attention to the world, diminish your thinking, diminish your activity, get simpler and simpler, and in a very short time, you'll get happier and happier than you've ever been in your entire life. Well, that may have worked for a few of Robert's students, but I don't think it worked for most of them. That's another oversimplification. I was looking for more in Robert and in Nisargadatta than I found there. And then you get into other kinds of spiritual teachers. And their books are dense with concepts, dozens of concepts, hundreds of concepts, interrelated. You're no longer talking about spirituality, but you're talking about learning a philosophy. And when they teach it as an absolutist, like they all do, not with the provisional kind of phrasing like, do you buy this? You want to buy this? I'm selling this right now. You don't have to buy it, but think about it. I was never very interested in them because they seem to be overthinking everything. So I reached the conclusion 2 days ago that Nisargadatta and most of the others were full of shit because they talked down to us by saying this is the absolute truth and then telling us some simplistic pablum that they talk about as being the ultimate truth. Ramana is not like that. Ramana's writings vary in terms of complexity, depend on when he wrote them. You know, the stuff he wrote when he was 30, which is not much, was very straightforward. But as the years passed, he was inundated with smart students that had all kinds of philosophical and spiritual training. And just by the interaction They told him how to wrap his philosophy in dozens of different concepts. So he lost his simplicity. He lost his virginity, so to speak. And he joined a group to become background noise of spiritual teachers. Now there are so many spiritual teachers. They could almost be a dominant subgroup of those who speak from a place of knowing, or speak ex cathedra, like they know the truth. And people come to hear the truth because they don't know their own truth. I really did that some at the beginning of my teaching career. But now I feel more like, let's investigate this shit together. Now, how do we do that for ourselves when we don't trust what we know? I know what I know based on 80 years of experience. There are a lot of teachers I don't understand, and I don't even try. There are a lot of spiritual masters in the past for the same reason. And the confusion is mostly in the stories that they embed their teachings in. You have to go through intense translation of their stories by understanding what the elements of their stories are and relating it to your own point of view so you can understand it from your point of view and make his story your story. Now, I was with Robert for 7 or 8 years. And I listened to his stories all the time. I even transcribed some of his, maybe 28 of them, of his satsangs. They're now part of his book, or the voluminous number of transcripts online. And I kept wondering, what is he really talking about? Because he'd go from saying you don't exist and the world doesn't exist into long criticisms of doing any activity whatsoever. And instead, just learning to rest, to be quieter and quieter, have nothing to do with the world, don't react to it. But what was that supposed to get you? It was hard for him to connect his teachings with what you're supposed to understand or the experiences you're supposed to have. And I'm sure you all have similar problems with teachings and teachers, spiritual teachings, etc., and trying to find out in yourself what you're really about. Who are you really? Because a lot of the spiritual teachers tell you, who are you? Ask yourself that, investigate that. But if you investigate without having a philosophy, and just watch yourself and turn your attention within and do things like just observing, what do you really learn? Now, I had 3 or 4 enlightenment experiences, 2 sets of 2. The one was with Robert, where I understood as a result of a single experience that I was different from consciousness, and consciousness came to me unbidden. And when it came, I was suddenly an individual immersed in the world. And then much more recently, a dozen years ago or so, I had what I called my God realization experience, which I also called realization of the manifest self. The self of energies, the internal explosion of energies that left as a residual a feeling of something alive in you that was not you, but you shared a common existence with. I felt that that thing that I realized in myself was a deeper aspect of myself. The energetic being aspect of myself, which I hadn't been aware of prior to that. But I also identified that as divine. That discovered energy within was an unformed being, an entity, the life force within me. That was not me, but was living through me. And I was embedded in it, so that in a sense we were identical, but separate still. It's hard to describe. And this entity has this presence, which is separate from my sense of presence, has stayed with me for a dozen years, and little changed, except I don't pay as much attention to it anymore. It's constantly there, so it's not as if it's new. Nor do I give it any interpretations anymore as being the divine. I may say that in satsang because I don't have any other words for it. But now I'm circulating away from that second set of opening experiences and returning to that of Robert. And am encountering once again the concept of nothingness. First of all, it's obvious we're alive. It's obvious to us. If we are to articulate it, we may say it in different ways, but we're alive. We know it. Self-aware to that extent. We have different awarenesses of ourselves based on what we've read and the introspection we've done, the teachers we've been with. But after 80 years, I don't believe any of it. I don't believe any of it. Because belief of any sort embeds you into that matrix that we all try to understand and also to escape. So what do I do now with my spare time? Well, I waste a lot of it watching things on the internet that I have no business being interested in. Wasting time watching television. And usually it's boring television. And always wondering at the base of it, what more can I understand about myself by observing myself? Observing myself in silence. Observing emotions. I don't have that much anymore at all. Observing my sense of being, that subtle buzz that's throughout my whole body and my consciousness that I associate with being awake and alive, which I was really first aware of in my enlightenment experiences of a dozen years ago, of the energies of the life force within me. Now I fully understand what I mean by the life force. I think I understand what I mean by consciousness. But other than that, almost anything else I say about it is an assumption or it's hearsay, something I heard from somebody else. Now, that buzz that I feel, my sense of beingness, what is its association with my consciousness? What is their association with my body other than they both arise inside this body? Can they arise outside of my body or other bodies? I really can't accept the concept that none of you exist when I'm asleep or dead. Can you? Can you accept that? That you're the only one in existence and everybody else is in your consciousness and is created by your consciousness? Can you accept that, Mark? Frank? I'd rather accept the common point of view is there are many, many, many humans and even many more other sentient beings that are conscious, aware, suffering, trying to stay alive. And I see how all beings seem to really want to stay alive. Is it because they know how boring it is to be dead? And they instinctively try to preserve their life, go to doctors, eat health food, exercise, 30 minutes a day. But in me, all of that trying and searching seems to have left. And I'm left with no energy to search, to exercise, to do. And instead, I feel like an energy balloon that's collapsing into itself, just resting in myself, even though I couldn't tell you what this self is. But the feeling is of relaxing and settling into myself with nowhere to go, nothing special to see. And in a sense, if on the upmost layer, top layer, what I experience is rather boring. And at the same time, realizing the sense of presence, this body and consciousness, as well as my mind, is an incredible miracle. Out of nothingness, all this came. And for maybe 75 of the 80 years, I really believed the stories I was given and tried to fit in. But I never fit into other people's stories. Being a very bright kid, I was given innumerable opportunities as a child and young adult to make something of myself. I got a bachelor's, and a master's, and a PhD. But I was just wasting time trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And the thing was, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I kept doing what I had been doing, which was being in school. Since leaving school, I've never wondered or had the slightest idea what I wanted to do. I just drifted along to whatever came up. And I kept reading and studying myself, reading spirituality, going to spiritual teachers of all kinds, and gurus and Zen masters. And even now, I have no idea what I was looking for. You have any idea what you're looking for coming here? I'm clueless, and it's really restful to be clueless and know that you're clueless. Gives me a chance to really relax. And in this relaxation, to just be myself. And what being myself means is I no longer search. I no longer look for spiritual principles or spiritual understanding. I accept my limitations, which is I trust just about nothing that I talk about because I know it's a story. And the real me, whatever that is not a story. It can only be lived and accepted. That means all philosophy has to be dropped. All conclusions have to be dropped. And I dwell in non-knowing, unknowing. And it's from narrowing my focus from the time when I was young and everything interested me. And I pursued everything. Dozens of different things, from being a bodyguard to security to being a psychologist. I never treated being a psychologist as a meaningful activity because psychology was complete bullshit. Psychology never taught you to look for ultimate things. Psychology never really taught you about yourself except as a theoretical entity with a mind and a brain and different configurations that explains different things. It was only after all that burnt out of me that I learned to just be. And that doing was a trap. Doing was an activity that took me out of myself and put me into a world that wasn't real because it was a creation of concepts and the concepts of millions and millions of people interacting together across many cultures and languages. And that matrix was me. No matter how I tried, I couldn't get rid of the matrix. It got less and less important, but I no longer struggled against it because I wasn't examining it anymore. Now, we can quite clearly grasp the matrix of other people because their life and their beingness rubs against us, causing a friction, and we investigate, we categorize, and we try to figure them out and figure them out in relationship to ourselves. So we can categorize other people and seem to think that we know them, but we don't. We only know where we frictionally interact, even those who have been in long relationships. It's really hard to get into their inner life and how they feel about themselves in the world. We get comfortable and we think we know them and what to expect of them, but we really don't know what their world is like. Except that in lots of ways, it must be like ours. And like ours, we've gone through different phases in our lives of looking for different things. Looking for enlightenment has always been one of my underlying drives. And it's hard to describe exactly what it was. How do you describe this drive? You can say, well, it's a drive to know yourself, but it's different than that. There's a felt sense in me, or there was, of an inner agitation that had to be settled somehow. And essentially, it was a drive to attain peace through my mind. But you can't obtain peace through your mind. No matter how many books by Krishnamurti you read, and how you can talk like Krishnamurti and argue like Krishnamurti, you're not a Krishnamurti. That's a suit you put on when you're living out the Krishnamurti story, which you've adopted as your own, which only lasts a certain period of time. So from that perspective, I'm asking you, who and what do you think you are? Does that question cause any movement in you? I can truly say as an answer to that question that I don't have the slightest idea. And what I do now is I know better than to ask myself stupid questions like that that'll only further agitate me. We're in a matrix, each of us, our own matrix, consisting of our life experience up to this point, what we've made out of those life experiences, plus the remaining drives in us that haven't been worked through or discarded somehow. And I realize I know nothing. I mean, I know a lot of things, but they're all bull. They're all stuff I've heard, hearsay. And if I talk what about I know myself, for myself, and only myself, I can only point out those 4 experiences that I had, 2 with Robert and 2 more recently with human beings, and the explosion of God within, which I call God, but by now you know that I'm just making up words in order to speak. I could go into great detail with this sense of being existent feels like, and as I experience it. And I realize that's the best way to communicate, is not to use a term life force without describing it as how you experience the life force. Now, if I had heard somebody speaking about the life force 14 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to relate to it because I didn't have an experience of anything I would call the life force in me. But after 12 years ago, I do. It's still there. It's still like a presence in me of a living presence, part of which is impersonal, and I can call God, but realize I just can't think of another word to use except impersonal. And part of it is personal, which is my own sense of existence. So, what I've been trying to do in the last few years, unconsciously and consciously both, is to reduce spirituality by using fewer and fewer words and speaking more and more about my experience of what those words mean. And I've gotten some surprising results. I try to read Nisargadatta now, and I read him for many, many years and treated him with the highest respect because I couldn't fucking understand him. Now I realize why I couldn't fucking understand him. He was a jerk. He had the most simplistic concepts about how the world and existence and life all work together. And he said the crux of the problems with most humans is they identify themselves as individuals. So stop it. That's his teaching. Stop identifying yourself as an individual. Well, I can't. I've tried. I've gone deeper and deeper into my sense of self, my own existence. And no matter how deeply I go, I'm still there as a person, a human. I'm not a disembodied consciousness. I'm not just an awareness of my body. I'm a whole bunch of things, including learned matrices inside of me that determine how I talk and interact with others, as well as this growing sense in me that there's nothing to be found. Yes, I can explore myself. I can look within in the emptiness and see the light I call of consciousness, see the darkness within, and see what appears to be a vast space inside of me and around me. And I can still feel some of the residual energies that I first felt a dozen years ago circulating in that vast emptiness. But it seems much more empty now than it is filled with experiences. And in a sense, it's more boring. But in a different sense, it's far more grounding, even though it's a grounding in emptiness. So I wonder, how can I teach you? I have nothing to give you except as far as you can. Take all the buried matrix in you expose it, and drop it off. All those things you know for certain, isolate them. And by close examination, realize you really don't know what you said you knew. That knowledge really is empty. It's a creation of mind. But mind doesn't know. Mind makes up words and gives the appearance of understanding. But true understanding only comes in those experiences of enlightenment or awakening that are so rare and world-shattering, because they shatter lots of what you thought you were and reveal something entirely new. And aren't those shattering experiences what we're really looking for? And you can't find them where you've lived all your life. You can only find them where you haven't explored. Now, you can ask yourself, where haven't I explored inside myself? I can only say, and what I suggest is be open to the new. Yes, rest in your very relaxed beingness. And something might arise that is new out of that inner void that is you. And then for a while, your life will radically change again as you integrate that into your existence. Not with thought, but with just staying with the new, resting in the new. And I mean in the experience of some new energy or new entity within you. Don't try to understand it, just rest there in it. It means more or less shut the fuck up, because anything you say will be from the matrices that you know, matrices you know. And I know that you know it because when I talk to some of you, I hear the same things over and over and over and over and over again. The phrasing, the point of view, the discovery is just repeated over and over again, and you become like a tape recording rather than a sentient human being. So I hope I've left you after this talk with nothing. I got nothing to teach you. You got nothing to learn and only things to unlearn. Become dumb as a rock. And boy, was that a hard one to hear. Because in a sense, it robs you of your importance of being knowledgeable or being up on things or being in the know. And instead, be in the not know. and feel how deflationary that feels. And on one hand, that's very disappointing because you feel like you're losing ground. And on the other hand, you feel more and more wonderful because another one of those inflamed teeth has just dropped out of your mouth and it's no longer bothering you. Now I know so many spiritual teachings are not teachings, but they're emphasizing doing nothing, like Zazen. The monks do nothing for several hours of the day except sit still and be themselves. And sometimes that means going through spiritual experiences, and other times it means becoming so still that the world disappears. And the rest of the day is very circumscribed, where there's hardly a need to talk at all. And you just function doing things, like going to and from the meditation hall, to and from the dining hall, to and from where you sleep. And it's all ritualized, and everything is done in silence without opening your mind at all. And it feels wonderful when you're in that environment and intensely practicing. Because you notice things you never noticed before. You notice, even though it's only 3 degrees outside, you have almost no need to wear heavy clothing. You can even walk on the ice barefooted and not be discomforted in any way. The more you settle in yourself, the more powerful you get. Even though you feel weaker and less powerful because you feel less intelligent and less knowledgeable. You're ripping away your long fur of intense education and seeking of knowledge, and resting instead as a shorn sheep in a warm, comfortable place. Eric is getting so comfortable, he's going to sleep. Okay. Here's where you get your chance to speak. Maxie, are you there today or off walking somewhere? Do you have anything to say? I haven't heard from you for a long, long time.
I'm here.
Do you have anything to say?
Know. Not really. My battery is almost empty. So yeah, my dog is doing fine, thanks to you. Fine is maybe an exaggeration, but he's alive.
How old is he?
He's close to 14. But he has very bad cancer, and he's had surgery and his spleen and 60% of his liver removed, and he's had intravenous chemotherapy 4 times now, and pills and everything. And But yeah, he's very happy. He's very lively right now.
That's
And
good.
if you hadn't convinced me to push for it, because everybody was against me except me, if you hadn't convinced me to push for it, he would be on the ground by now. So
Doesn't it feel wonderful to fight for a loved one's life, even when everybody else is saying, let him go?
oh, definitely. Yeah, it's one of the few things worthwhile.
To keep a loved one with you an extra year or 2 years.
Yeah,
It's such a win.
yeah.
It makes your soul feel good that you've been able to do that.
Yes, and he's still alive, so hopefully he'll be alive for, I don't know, a little longer. He's
It's
happy.
good to hear from you, Maxie.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Ed. Thank you for everything. I was here.
Okay. Vesselina, you've disappeared the last couple of times. Why are you hiding? Or maybe you're the one that's gone out for a walk.
I'm here. I have a test tomorrow. I have an exam.
Is that why you put yourself in the dark?
Yeah.
What's the test?
Pediatrics, a second part. Like
Well,
I had a practical, and now I have a test.
you'll do well on it because you like pediatrics.
Yeah, I really like it, but I don't have time to read it all. It's so much.
Yeah, you have so much to do with nobody else in the house except 2 cats, right?
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm okay. I just the cat is
You just what?
the cat is what is that word? Scratching the toilet, the cat toilet, and I was very annoyed. I had to go. I am very nervous. I'm like hyperactive, hyper like stressed and panicked.
Relax. Just fucking relax. You either pass or you don't. What difference does it make? If you don't pass, you just have to wait around a couple more months till you take the test again. You could
No.
drag out your doctorate till you're 45.
The grade is important. I will probably pass, but I need a good grade for future possibilities and things.
Well, you can do like Robert. And whenever you want something, you just say, God, 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 and state what you want. And maybe one of these days you'll get what you want, like good grades, or like with Robert, you'll get enlightened.
Oh yeah.
So that's a good practice. Just say God, 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 state what you want, and then wait. You don't have to do anything else. Don't study. That's stupid. Stupid people study. They bury themselves deeper into a matrix. Good seeing you.
Good seeing you too.
Michael, how about you? Can you come and share? Maxie has and Vesselina has. It's your turn.
No, I'm walking.
Oh, okay. Anybody else? Anybody else?
Okay, Ed, I got the request. I'm anybody else,
Okay.
but you said you have no idea of who you are, but when you go by the premise of neti neti, by eliminating all the false appearances of self, hopefully one is left with what is left, which is the unknowable self. So the four big spiritual experiences you referenced gave you an idea, I believe, gave you an idea of what was not you, right? By showing you what was you, you could eliminate all the false appearances of self. As like you say, the matrix, the mundane self are all just concoctions of the mind and memory and conditioning and all that. So although you don't know who you are, I think you're quite familiar with what you're not, which is what you were leading up to your clarification. So it's like the neti neti, right? We can't know what we are, but we can learn and identify what is not us, but which appears to be us, and eventually see through the illusion. So that's just another way of looking at what you were saying.
Uh-huh.
Another way of restating the same thing. I find it helpful.
Jay, you haven't spoken in a long time.
Thank God. I think that's a good thing. I wanted to thank Ian and Cassie. Ian sent me something, a video from Lester Levinson, which I love. I think sometimes he thinks that I'm somehow a voice of machinations or energies or something, which I'm not sure that I know that I am, or maybe not knowing that I am is closer to knowing that I am, or some bullshit machinations, which I can't even fathom. But I try to look at a template for mundanity, and I try to see something in the context of nothing exists apart from mind. And I think that allows me to deal with the pure potentiality of every moment in a different way, with an absolute spontaneity, which I think all the time, as you bring, as you talk about God manifest, you talk about something in energies and experiences in every moment, which if I just let go of it, the power starts to resonate so much more deeply. If I just live in the absolute, not your absolute, because I don't know that, but I only know it from Advaita nomenclature, but just in God realization or God manifest, it just starts to, the shit starts to line up, the ducks line up and things get easier. And I really want Eric to share some of the correspondence that he shares with you, because I really think that Eric seems to be approaching a Steve Eckert level of illumination. And I would love to know more about what he's experiencing. And Ian and Cassie, I love you and thank you. God bless. I mean, I love you, and as I love everyone here.
Look what happened to Steve Eckert, though. He disappeared totally.
There's that expression, 20 poles from power, just feeding the bees and the raccoons and everything. But the way he writes, there's anyone who's had an experience like that, whom I've read on your blog, comes from a different place. Something happens. These are words, but something happens and you don't go back. When the ego collapses, something changes. And I can't look for it, because the more I look for it, the more it goes away. So if anything ever, if in any moment of realization, it would be just to go dumb as a rock, as you say every single time, just go dumb as a fucking rock. Rocks meditate. They probably are the most illuminated things on the planet or anywhere. Whatever they are, they just sit there and watch the shit go by. And they are just amazing. So, yeah, don't get me wound up.
Well, I guess you could start your own business of selling knowledgeable rocks or guru rocks.
It's not so far-fetched, let me tell you.
Have your own guru installed in your house on your altar.
I brought someone back a rock from Alaska, and actually I shot a video of it, and I put the beautiful rock that I picked up down, and then I lost it, and the bus was leaving. And so I brought them a rock from a pot of rocks that my wife had in the dining room. And I said it's from Alaska. Still never know. And it probably is from Alaska somewhere, a billion years ago. Anyway, make this shit up. I work with the material I have at the moment.
Good for you. You're winging it.
Yeah, well, that's what I did for 50 years in broadcasting and still doing it.
What did you do in broadcasting?
I was in on-air promotion, NBC television, writing advertising campaigns, well, news and movie, new broadcast news toward the end with the Berlin Wall collapsing, working for Tom Brokaw, Brian Gumbel, Katie Couric, writing for on-air talent, did movies and miniseries for years. So, but my wife is better at this every day than I am. And we got along because our kinds of styles complemented each other. And besides, we loved each other. And, we've been married for 49 years. So anyway, it's all a blessing, pure blessing and pure bliss. Thank you.
Bernadette, you have anything to say?
I was just thinking, instead of trying to understand what teachers are saying, if I just cooperate with what's going on inside me, that seems to work. You were talking about Nisargadatta and everything, and I just thought, if I have that desire, like you talked about, to know myself, be enlightened, whatever it is, I have some kind of longing that provides me with what I need. Not that I'm not affected by teachers, certainly that pushes me along, but that's what came to mind when you were talking.
What came? Try that one sentence again.
That instead of trying to understand the books and the teachings, just cooperate with what's going on inside of me, because there is something inside of me that's pulling me along, taking me where I'm longing to go.
Okay, very well said. Chris is shaking his head yes. You agree, or you have a different?
No, yes, I agree. I just capture, I try to control things too much, but I try to catch myself, and just a willingness to let go, a willingness to just see what happens. Just don't try to make anything happen, just see what happens. Let it go.
You noticed something, not directed at you, Chris, but everybody, that our Sangha is getting smaller and smaller, but it's very stable. It's very stable. I love the cat. Whenever somebody brings a cat to the camera, I love it. Jay looked for his cat to see if he could go get it, but he couldn't find it. Well, I love you all. Come again Wednesday.
Thank you so much.
And when you get your A on your test tomorrow, let me know, will you? Love you all. Take care. See you Wednesday. Bye-bye. Turn it over to Cassie and Ian.